Uh, I'll probably stand right where you can't see. Okay. Over in Eudora, I just have the screen down here like this, so I have to be careful where I stand, and I'm not used to that. Well, as you know, the church here has been very good to help us with our mission work, and even though the work that we're doing this year isn't quite what we thought we were going to be doing at this time last year, but we are still able to do some Philippines mission work, and then we're able to do some evangelism here, but we're just not traveling around. We're just trying to focus on one place primarily, and they need it too. So I get a lost soul wherever they are is just as valuable as the next one. So we're thankful for that, and thankful to have a chance to, but also have a chance to continue to do some mission work. The work in the Philippines, where we're going, is in the southern part, and it's a place where we had last year helped to get a congregation established, and so this year we traveled on the 22nd, from 22nd of August till the 17th of September, and that's sandwiched right between the all-day meeting up in Davis City, which was on the 20th, and then, of course, the lectureship here started on the 18th. One thing we decided is we're never going to arrive back in the country the day before the lectureship starts again. We're not going to do that. It didn't work out quite the way we imagined. But anyway, those are the dates. And of course, we flew from Kansas City. I was trying to learn how to play games with this thing. To Tokyo, and then from Tokyo down to Manila. And then during the last year, they opened up a little hotel in the airport. So we were able to get a bed and sleep for about 4 or 5 hours before we had to, because you can't leave the airport. It takes 2 hours to get back in it, just in the traffic. And so you can't really go and check in a hotel someplace. And we had a 3:45, I think, flight out the next morning to go down to the southern province. And there in the Philippines, and this is some information that you might remember, because I think this is important for people to remember about the Philippines where we're working. There are over 7,000 islands, and so it's a lot of islands. Not all of them are inhabited. There are some that are only used for tourism, and some are just, if you happen to row a boat over there, you might be there. But there's about 100 million people. Over 80% Catholic and over 5% Muslim. And if you're following the news with the new president that they just elected here just a few months ago, who's been he's draining their swamp, okay, of all the drug pushers that are involved in there's a lot of politicians and officials and like the prison system and the police and national police and local government officials who have been really corrupt with the drug pushing, and he's trying to clean house, and he's doing a good job, but it's a mess over there. But anyway, the Mindanao is notorious for militant Muslims, and in the western part of the island where we're spending our time, I wouldn't even go there without really doing a lot of investigation and making sure that all the ducks are in the right row, because it's a good way to get kidnapped or murdered for an American, and so it's a very volatile situation there. But his mother was Muslim, I think, or grandmother or something, so he's able to try to build some ties. So hopefully in the future, even that will get better. To try to get better relationships to make it a more peaceful situation. But the areas where we're going, even though it's the same island, we're very safe in the areas where we're at. And I got some different pictures that show kind of the life in the province where we've been working, because it's just not like here. And eventually we're going to try to fix up a place where people come to help us with different campaigns. There's several people that have asked me about coming over there. And actually now I know a place where people could stay without costing a fortune. But until we got over there this time, I really didn't even know any facilities that were around for where someone could stay and rent a room for a night. Anyway, in the picture here, this is the water. See, the top one is the pointer, right? We have a flowing water, and that comes from 120 feet down. That's drinkable water. I can drink it, no problem. Last year, Beth, I didn't know till later, Beth was afraid to drink it last year. I was drinking it the whole time. But anyway, but it's really good fresh water. And actually, during the early part of the year, there was a serious drought in the southern Philippines, and all the neighbors around there, that's the only water that was still flowing, was their water. And so they really became a blessing to the whole area. And but that's the running water. Okay, I told Beth if I was going to do it in my own home, I'd want to put it onto a fountain or something, make it look pretty. But anyway, that's where the people come and wash their dishes, and they come and wash their laundry. And the church had to put up a sign on the little gazebo that they have out in the back. If I call it a kubo, that's what I'm talking about, but that's what they call it. Don't come and wash stuff during the Bible class and the worship, because people were starting to come, and it was a distraction. And you'll see why in a little bit. Pardon? Well, that's a home. It's just in back behind their house. Yeah, it's their land. That's just the private stuff. We had that drilled, I think, 3 years ago, so we could have water. and then this is her little niece, Abby, and one of her sisters who lives in the city. She just came down to visit, and this is inside the kubo, the gazebo where the church actually meets. But one of her brothers was visiting from the city, and he was helping to fix the generator, because we got one of those little cheap Chinese generators, and after 2 years, it's falling apart. But that's what we have for electricity. It was funny because I was coming back from a Bible study one night from one of the members' house across town, and there was a power outage. And the whole town was black. It was just dark as could be. And I come around the bend, and there's the lights on at their house. So it was a blessing. And then the kids are actually, they're knocking the corn. That's not shucking it, I guess, but they're what do you call it when you take the corn off the corn husks? Shelling it. They were shelling it. Okay. They make a game out of it. Whenever you don't have computers to play with all the time, you can make a game out of anything. Okay? And so, but that's what they do. And they'll play in the dirt and play in just whatever there is. And then this is an example of one of the little houses. Beth's brother built this little house right back there. And I was going back to see it. It's just like a little one room. It's probably about the size of maybe one of these rooms here, and it has what they call a dirty kitchen outside. I don't have a close-up of that, but it's just they build like a table, and they'll put dirt on it, and then they'll cook on top of that with wood, and so that's pretty typical of that area. We do have propane too, so sometimes they can use propane, but actually some of her sisters and brothers and her mom would rather not even use the propane. Just put the sticks of wood on there, and that's what they're accustomed to. And then Raymond, he's the one who built the little house, but he's cleaning out a coconut. Okay, I mean they live on a coconut plantation, and that's where the church meets. We have to be careful where we build stuff, because the coconuts will fall and destroy the roof. And they had to remove a tree last year, since last year, because it was falling on one of the structures that we had. And then this is pretty typical. I was sitting on the front porch, and I didn't zoom in to take this picture. Okay, Beth's one of her sisters takes care of some cows, and payment every second one that's born becomes hers, and that's one of the ways that they try to make a living. It works. I mean, they don't make a lot, but they had some pigs out in the back, and one day during the Bible study, someone had to hurry up and run over to rescue one of them, because he almost choked himself to death wrapped around a tree. But they have to keep him tied up on there. But anyway, that's life in the country. Okay, some of you may have seen that in your own lives whenever you were young, or visited someplace on the farm. And then in the countryside, this is pretty typical transportation. Actually, that's Beth's motorbike, but her brother rides that. Now, that's a Chinese motorcycle. Okay, it had about 400 miles on it since last year, and the speedometer cable was already broken. And I had to buy a new one. I said, is that typical to have to replace one of those every 6,000 kilometers or whatever? Anyway, but that's a lot. Now, if you'll see, her brother Tony is taking two of the kids to school. That's a little 110 motorbike, okay? But I see, and I never did get a good picture of them because they were too far away and moving too fast. But if you're out on the road going to school in the morning, you'll see a bike about like that with about 5 people on it going to school. And they just load them up. And then this is a pretty typical, what they call a trike. You see those all over the Philippines. It's a motorbike, sometimes 150, 175 cc's. That's about as big as they put on them. And then they just have a little sidecar, and there'll be another wheel on that side. And that's basically their taxi service in a lot of areas. It's a poor man's taxi. Except for in the province, this is the poor man's taxi. And that bike actually belongs to one of Beth's brothers. Now, she has 12 siblings, so if I say brothers and sisters, it's not always the same one. And that's one of their boys. But that little bike right there, his business. Now, I just want you to understand a little bit about the economy. He was renting a bike like that for 35 pesos per day. Okay, about 47 pesos is $1, and he was renting that for 35 pesos per day, and he would make about he might make 150 pesos in a day on a good day. And so he was riding his bike in the morning. One morning I asked him, because he'd go out and do his morning taxi service, and then he'd come in for our Bible study. We scheduled our morning Bible studies around his work schedule so he could be there. And he was one of the guys that was baptized, and his wife actually this trip. But I asked him, how did you do this morning? I made 25 pesos. So he hadn't even paid for the rent for that day, and he's got 3 boys to feed. And so, but Beth, one of the things that she does out of our food budget, I give her a fixed amount every month, and if we have anything left over, then she sets it aside so she can have something to maybe help her brothers and sisters a little bit. And she bought him that one. It was cheap. It was part of the tubing is rusted out and stuff, but he painted it up and started fixing it up and cleaning it up, so now he doesn't have to pay to rent one. And boy, he was really, really proud of that. And he was so excited because, and that was, he was already, I don't think that was after he obeyed the gospel actually, but it was around the time when it was clear he was going that direction. But he was so excited because he says, now I don't have to worry about, my work schedule. I can make my own work schedule, and I can be here for the worship, I can be here for the Bible studies and do all the things. And that's the way he was thinking. But anyway, that's and the people will pay like 6 pesos for a ride per person. So and they'll charge per bag if they have some heavy bags or something. But you just pedal that around like a bicycle, and that's what it is. It's one manpower, no horsepower. Anyway, that's kind of what life is like there. Pretty typical for all the people that live in the area. Now, there are a few people who are well-to-do in every community, but most people just live out in the country like that. Although a lot of people do have electricity. The water's typical. But then we went down to the southern province of Davao, to the Davao City. That's actually the hometown of the president there now. And that's the second safest city in the Philippines. And land-wise, I believe that's the largest city on Earth, square miles. But it's not that populated, but it's big. But anyway, we fly down there. I can't remember how many miles it was. This is about like from here to Atlanta, fly. And so then we take a bus. Actually, we took a cab because we bought some stuff in the city, and that we took down that we needed down in the country. So but most of the time you just take a bus. It's about a 2-hour ride on the bus, or 3, depending on which bus you take. And of course, we had 3 main goals. We were trying to teach the lost souls there and train some preachers. Well, I went too far here. And come on. And then we were trying to help establish better the young congregation there. And so on August 21st, there were 5 people that obeyed the gospel last year. And this is the picture of them. That was from those 2 over here, Elmer and Nono, and then Beth's mother, and then Bibing, her sister, and then Nono's daughter. And she just turned 13 the day before she was baptized, so she was excited about that. And then there had already been some who'd been baptized some years before that. On September the 1st, September the 6th last year, after we returned, and then one other girl was baptized. And that was a couple of weeks after we had been there. But she had learned a lot. While we were there, we were doing daily Bible studies. And sometimes we get to do 2 or 3 in a day. Sometimes it may end up being only 1, depending on who's available. But most of the times we did at least 2 studies every day. We'd have a morning study and then an afternoon or evening. And then we were having individual classes, answering questions with different individuals. As people have time during their day, they'll just come by and we'll teach them. And so I'll be spending time maybe preparing for the evening study, or if someone comes and does that, then I have another study that I wasn't planning on. And then here, we went to a house, Brother Franklin, and he and his family, they've been Christians for several years, and they lived in the town there, but no one knew them, and they didn't know anything about the church meeting there. But through one of the preachers who had been coming and that we've known for several years, her brother is a preacher in another area, and they knew each other, and he said, hey. So he put them together, and they're a very good couple. And their daughter was one of the people that was baptized this trip, actually, their oldest daughter. So we were thankful about that. But we went to their house. They live across town. And we went to their house and had some Bible studies in their home with their neighbors on 3 different occasions. And some of them came to some other events that we had. We were really thankful about that. But they weren't even imagining that could happen. And so by the fact that we're going to their house now on the other side of town and setting up Bible studies and having this event, opportunity to teach, then they start to realize some of those young people are very, very interested in learning. In fact, there were a couple of young ladies there who were 15 that they had, in the Philippines, they have to get their parents' permission because they're minors. And their parents aren't ready to let them do that yet. Very devout Catholics, okay? And so they're not ready to let their daughters obey the gospel just yet. I think in time that will change. But they need to have a chance to get to know and be more comfortable with what the church is about, and maybe their parents will obey the gospel one day as well. But Brother Franklin Baliva is the man, and he's, that's him sitting right there. It's kind of a dark because it was night in their house, but he would just read Bible study and teach and lead their worship every Sunday in their home. But since several months ago now, they've been meeting with the church, and they'll bring people on their motorcycle and things like that. And then this is a pretty typical class and the Sunday morning Bible class, but we have that many people in some of the other studies throughout the week as well. But that's the kubo where we meet, actually. And this is sitting inside the kubo for a Bible study, and here we're singing some songs. But we did the daily teaching. In 2016, on this trip, on September the 3rd, and this is dark, this is at a swimming pool, at a resort where we rented some rooms for visiting people, that some preacher students that came that I had a chance to do a little seminar with, and we rented the hall to do an event, to do Bible classes, or to do a Bible study All the members were there. The visiting young preachers, students that are about to graduate from Southern Mindanao Bible College were there. And then there were several non-members from the community that came. And Beth said, I even became friends with the lady who manages this now. So we're hoping that will open up doors. But this was 11:30 at night. Okay, after that evening, that Saturday evening event, she said she wants to obey the gospel. So we just went over there and did it. But there's not good lighting because it's not designed for people to use at night. So, and anyway, her name is Mika, and that's the daughter of Franklin Baliva, he's, by the way, preaching one Sunday a month now there. It's helping him to grow and study more. And he just got an email address last week, so now I can send him some other material. And then on the September the 7th, Elmer and Florida, which is his wife, and Elmer's one of Beth's brothers. He's the one that has the little bicycle taxi service. And then Charlotte, who had been she was wanting to get baptized last year, but she was living with a guy and wasn't ready to move out or marry him. Well, she said, I want to be baptized. I said, well, you either have to get married or stop living together. That day, she packed her stuff and went back to her parents' house and was baptized. And she's still at her parents' house. And they've already started the procedures for getting all the things taken care of that they have to do to get married. What's interesting, in the Philippines, they have a lot of indigenous people, tribes, they call tribal. And these people that live in this area, they live under tribal cultures. And the Philippines will recognize tribal marriages. And tribal marriages, they don't even have a marriage certificate. They don't have the formality has to do with the two families just getting together and doing some kind of a little, kind of semi-formalizing it. The government will recognize the marriage, only the first two children that are born are legitimate. So if they have a third child, if it's a tribal marriage, the child's not considered a legitimate child. But the second thing is, for a man, if a man is ever baptized, except for if he's baptized as a baby in the Catholic Church or something like that, because he didn't have anything to do with it, okay? But if he's ever baptized with a real baptism, okay, then he can never, ever enter a tribal marriage. But they didn't know that. And so I think that there were some misunderstandings actually about what could and couldn't happen there. But in the end, anyway, that couple had not formalized even from the tribal perspective, the marriage. And then there's another couple that we baptized last year that during the past year they tried to enter one of these tribal marriages, and they're the problem because her family really is tribal. I mean, they live up in the mountains and stuff, and very low education level, completely different culture. But she was baptized, and he was baptized, and they started living together, thinking that. But they actually did try to do the process for formalizing a tribal marriage, but it's not legitimate. The government won't recognize it, and we were teaching them, and that's one of the problems that the church is trying to work with right now, to help them to understand you can't do this. They had stopped coming to worship because they were so discouraged about it. And I said, don't stop coming to worship. You need the Bible teaching. You need to learn. You need to grow. And they started coming back again, but they're still, and the church not letting them take any leadership role or anything. They're trying to help them to overcome it. So that's the kind of struggles that you face in situations like that. Stuff that I'd never had imagined. And then Raymond was baptized on September the 9th. And so that's in the same pool where we had some other event. We had a meeting in a little place there that we could have electricity. And so we baptized him after that. And then on September the 11th, Lang Lang, who's her sister and father, were baptized last year. And she's 17. And she was crying one day. We were having some Bible studies, and we talked with her about it. And then on Sunday, she actually responded to the invitation. And we had a couple of deep studies with her. Beth had a serious talk with her. During the past year, we saw her last year just a couple of times at the beginning of our trip and never saw her again. And she had gone and started living with her boyfriend, who was like 20 or 22, and she was 16. And but then she's not doing that anymore. She's back at home, and she feels so bad about the way she lived. But now she knows she has a hope, and so she's learning, and the family's learning, and the church there is growing because they're having to help deal with these kind of things. It's not only America where people do that, where young people do that. Okay, it's one of the big problems that they're facing in the Philippines. Now, just imagine though, 80% Catholic. And a lot of people living together are not married. Makes you wonder about the religion, doesn't it? And then part of the work that we had planned to do was to do some training for some of the preachers. My primary concern was to try to prepare preachers who are going to be helping with the church there in the province so that we can know that they're teaching the right things and that they're not leaving things out. And so the Southern Mindanao Bible College I had never met any people from there, but I had one of my friends, Rolex. His father used to work on watches, and he named all their children after watches. Okay. Anyway, most of them changed their names, but he didn't. And Omega didn't either, but Timex did. Okay. But I'm serious. And he had like seven siblings, and they all had watch names. Gruen. Anyway, but he helped us arrange for the director to bring 5 of the students that were going to be graduating this year from Southern Mindanao Bible College over. And it was really enjoyable to meet them because now they came over to the province. I said, I'm not going to, because our trip was only, our entire trip, including travel time, was just under a month. And so I didn't want to take any time to travel someplace in the middle of all this because you lose too much time. You lose a day going, you've got to get everything organized, and then, so we just set it up in the living room. We ran the generator that day so I could use the PowerPoint because I took my projector. And and that's Rolex actually sitting there. And he comes from General Santos City. But these are some of the students here. And I'm back there teaching. But I did the PowerPoint, a seminar, what they call a seminar. They call everything a seminar, on declaring the whole counsel of God. And one of the things that I emphasized was who is qualified to teach. Because in the Philippines, there's so much influence by people like Pepperdine and ACU and people who are just enamored with things like Tulsa Workshop and all that stuff. Some of the people that will come over there and teach in big events are people who are like working with congregations, or maybe an eldership will oversee 3 congregations somewhere in Oklahoma. Or there's a congregation that'll have a coffee shop and they just go into business, and then part of their ministries include interdenominational stuff. I mean, this is the congregations that have a lot of influence in the Philippines. And so very common practice is to have presentations over there. I don't know if that's something that's starting to become a problem all over the world, I guess, but where people, and praise teams and things like that. And so one of the things that everybody who comes to Santa Maria knows is there's not going to be any presentations there. We're going to all sing congregational, or we're not going to sing it at all, okay? And they all understand that. But I was trying to help them to understand you don't need to go sit at someone's feet who teaches and practices things you shouldn't. You don't have to do that. You can find sound people and only emphasize being sound and what needs to be taught. People are not being taught about pure moral behavior. I taught a lesson on Ephesians chapter 4, starting with verse 17. And when you know that chapter gets into some moral things, behavioral things. And when I finished, one of the men said, the Philippine preachers will never preach that. They're afraid to. And I'm thinking, well, that's why we're having problems then. And so I covered those things. And I'm hoping that I can influence some of the people. Now, there are some who will, okay? but as a whole, it's all a big party. It's getting big numbers in there and having entertainment with the singing and all that kind of stuff, but no really good, sound, deep teaching. And so I was trying to help with that. Taught some principles about how to avoid the hobby horse. Just good preaching principles that you learn when you go to preacher school. And practical suggestions about maintaining balance, so that there's lessons about faith in God, lessons about the church and worship, and lessons about the plan of salvation, but lessons about everyday life and the right things to know. And so I was teaching those things, and Brother Guillermo, who's the director, he asked, can I have a copy of that PowerPoint and the notes and things? So maybe they're going to incorporate that. And then I took them boys up on the mountain. Now, I go up there every year, and we'll have a Bible class. But I said, we're going to do it when you guys are here. And they had no clue what they were in for. We're climbing that mountain. And, of course, you're exhausted when you get up there. It's probably about maybe 300 feet or 400 feet up there. And it's a pretty steep hike. But we go up there, and I said, you guys come up, and this is climbing up the hill. But what they learned was you can think outside the box about how and where to teach people. It doesn't have to be in a Bible class in a church building or in someone's living room. You can find places and opportunities, and all of them were interested in that. And so I was glad they were able to be there. And then this is the event hall where we were able to do the lesson, and that's why all the preacher students were there, still there. We had some congregational singing. We have hymnals in Visayan language and the English language. The old hymnals that we used to use here, we took a bunch of them last year, and that's what's being used. And so we only let them sing. They got away with a couple at the beginning because the guys wanted to sing English. I said, do not sing any songs that are not also in the local language. Because we want everyone to be able to be part of this, and a lot of people don't speak English in the province like that. In the cities, everybody speaks English. But when you get into the countryside, a lot of people don't. Or they might understand a little bit, but they're not used to that. And so we tried to make it where they can sing songs that they can understand. You need to understand what you're singing. I'll sing with the understanding, Paul said in 1 Corinthians 14. About 50 people, including some children, attended. And we had the lessons that I had prepared for new converts. What am I as a Christian? And I think I did this one here, or maybe Dad did lessons on that. The present, it looks funny, the letters. But anyway, so I had different points, and in the middle we had a break. We had dinner. Beth cooked for everybody. She likes to cook. She cooked rice and all kinds of things, and she just loaded up the tables. And then, so we had a break, had dinner, and then cleaned up the tables in the second half. And that's why we finished like 10:30 at night. And between 10:30 and 11, we were getting ready to baptize Mika, and then we baptized her. So, and then finally we were trying to establish the young church. And so the daily teachings that we did included, of course, some children's classes. A lot of children. You can see there's several. She might have 4 one day. There might be 15 the next day. I mean, you don't know who's going to be available. But that'd be up on the front porch. And this was the first evening. I had a Bible study, and several people were there, and it was nice. And then this is one of the Bible studies. This is not the Sunday worship. This is just one of the Bible studies that we had during the week. And I was doing lessons on things like the need for God and putting God first and moral purity, things like that, importance of worship, and also had to deal with eating blood. People in America don't really have that culture generally, but in a lot of places in the world, people eat blood. And Beth's brother, he goes, I like that, but I'm going to have to stop doing it. And Beth's mom said, that's what the Bible says, that's what you have to do. And that's the attitude we like to hear, see. So that's the way the church is starting to grow there. And so we had multiple lessons on, I did a series of lessons teaching people how to study the Bible in context. We would take a text, I'd say, what do you think? They'd read it, the next day we'd come together, What do you think this is teaching? What do you learn from that? And then we would go through it, and that's the lesson that I did for Ephesians 4:17 to the end. So they were really getting into that and learning how to see things contextually. And then this is one of the lessons that we did in Brother Franklin and Sister Margie's house, the Believa's house. And you can see they had a lot of young people there. And it's Franklin and his wife Margie, and then they have a daughter and a son who live at home. And their older daughter wasn't here for this. She's off to school during the week. But all the rest of those, there's me and there's Beth, but all the rest of them were just neighbors of theirs. First time they'd ever heard the Bible taught in that way, see? And so some of them were relatives, some of them were just neighbors. A lot of times relatives happen to live in the same area, so they might be cousins, second cousins and things, but even though they're not that close. And then we had a planning meeting, and in the planning meeting, we talked about the teaching. Some of the women who's going to be teaching the Bible classes, what they're going to teach, what the material, who's going to preach, how to organize the preaching better, the support for the preachers. And so we engaged different people in some of these things, and that's whenever Brother Believer had agreed to go ahead and teach one Sunday a month, and then we send support for preachers to come, for them to support preachers to come once a month for 3 different preachers, and they each come a particular Sunday each month. And so that way the church there is the one who's supporting the preacher coming to help them, instead of someone else sending a preacher to preach for them. And that way they can take ownership of it. And if there's a problem, then they can say, well, we're not going to have you anymore, we'll have somebody else. And so that way I think that's the right way to do it. I talked about other matters, including the kubo where the church meets. You can see it's not very big. A lot of people sit outside, and then I got to hurry up here so this is what one of the things that was brought up was the expansion of the kubo, and this is what it looked like. It's the week before we went. No, this is anyway, that's about the time just before we went there. Okay, one of the Sundays before we, and then this is what it looks like now. It cost about. They expanded it 8 feet, doubled the size of it. The floor is not very fancy, but everyone can get inside when it's raining, and that was their concern. Everyone can come inside now, so we need to help. We're going to help them get some chairs, and there's a good place for the whiteboard. I didn't see this until the pictures came. This was built about 3 weeks after we came back. Okay, but I left the funds. It cost about $80 to do that expansion, and we're going to try to help them fix it up a little bit nicer next time. But anyway, that's one of the things that the brethren there said, we need to do this. And so I said, well, let's see what it needs. And then in Davao City, we met with some people. I didn't meet, that's President Duterte, but that's not him. That's just a cardboard. That's where he likes to eat a lot, so we didn't get to see him. But one of Beth's friends is a lawyer, and he's a Christian. All of these have been having some struggles because of moral issues and some of their other family members, and they've been weak. And so we tried to encourage them stuff. And then in the city, we met with some friends of Beth's that we're hoping to have a studies with next time. We didn't have any time. And then one of her sisters, she's helping us with some legal matters down there. And then brother and sister Franco, they're some of the old-time Christians that have been around for decades, and good couple. And so anyway, we had a chance to talk with them about some of the work up in another part of the Philippines, and then we came home. We set things in order and try to make all the arrangements that were necessary to help sustain the church. And so that doesn't leave a lot of time for questions. I guess if you have questions, you can ask me after the worship's over tonight. So thank you. We do appreciate